26th, what is it? 2100 hours, and I'm here in the cave, and I made a quick stop by the lab to pick up, the Arduinos? ETH 10, or ETH 10. So, thanks again to Ben Jones who donated these. These are actually pretty darn cool. Right here I've got the that Ethernet Arduino with the motor driver right on top of it, and it's actually pretty cool. But as you can see, maybe you can't. There's a very tiny little gap, and in fact, the pins that stick through from this blue connector, I had to cut them down, and maybe you can see it, maybe you can't. Let's get a little more, maybe some more light here. But there's a piece of black electrical tape on top of the Ethernet connection because I just don't trust it, to frankly say. But I took some time and I looked up some code. So for that, the motor controller code seems to be working, so there doesn't seem to be any, conflict of what's going on yet. So really what I need to do now is just kind of continue to play with the Ethernet, and I want to play and get that running and send a telnet connection or telnet command to it and get it to respond. And that's kind of my next step. So it's a little bit later, and I punched up some default code. You probably can't read that, but so I punched up some default code and I loaded it in the Arduino, and you can see some connection lights and whatnot. And if I come over to the screen, and I've got two windows here. I got this top window here, which has this IP address that I programmed in, and then down here this is actually running through the COM port, and you can see that when I come up here and I send my little test, let me clear the screen so you can actually see things. No port open. Okay, something went sideways. Port open. Must have kicked me somehow. Okay. I'll send. You can see messages being sent out there. This is a response from the Arduino through Telnet, and then you can come down here. You can see that it actually is outputting onto the serial port as well. So I'm getting a message coming through the through the wireless, through the Ethernet, into the Arduino, through the Ethernet, and then out the USB cable, and through a fake COM port. So it works. The thing that's got me a little apprehensive now is that little LED lit right there. Focus. That shouldn't be lit right now, and that's the, I think, reverse direction for motor controller channel B. It's a little concerning. I'm not certain what it means at this point. I quickly kind of looked at the Arduino network pin layout, and I can only see one connection. I think it runs over to 10, and then there's another one for the micro SD, but I think neither of those are actually in the motor controller pin definition. So in other words, there's no conflict. There shouldn't be a conflict. So what I really think I'm going to do now is write a little bit of code that does some I'm going to take the test motor controller code and this Ethernet controller code and kind of stick them together and see if it'll spin the motor a little bit. So I've been playing with it, the device, the configuration, and even broke out my fancy-dancy power supply and whatnot. And I've come to the conclusion I'm having an interference problem, or a pin interference. It looks like the Ethernet and the motor controller board share a couple of pins, so there's definitely some kind of a problem, and I can't really modify the Ethernet Arduino because it's, too complicated. But, I probably could. But I do have the motor control board, which I might be able to reassign a couple of pins. I have to think about it a little bit more. But it's not like it's an end-of-the-world kind of thing. But, I might be able to cut and jumper some traces around and move the pins to a new location, and that might solve the problem. I just don't really know what the best solution is right now. So after a little bit of looking at the board, looking at the sheets, and thinking about things, I think what I've decided. Whoa! Apparently, I've decided to undo the lock on my chair too. Thing I've decided to do is remove the brakes. There's a little. I don't know if there's enough light and if this will focus, but there's a little series of brake pins. So number 8 and 9 are for braking, which I guess just kind of turns both of the channels on at the same time, or I'm not exactly certain, but it holds the motor where it's at. So my thought process is, if I remove the 2 brake lines and use those 2 pins as the actual directional one, and then tie both of those brakes maybe to 1 pin, that way I can still lock the motor in place, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's a bad idea too. I don't really know. I'm really not certain what the proper direction here is. I probably don't need the brakes, but they could be nice. But at the same time, the motor, the robot that I'm working on, seems to hold its position pretty well. But I guess if the motor was to roll, or the camera was to roll into one position, mainly the vertical piece, there's a chance that it could have this cantilevered force, and it'd probably be good that the brake would be holding it. But I don't know. I guess I gotta think about that some more.